rise in body and or spirit for our opening hymn, number 170, We Are a Gentle, Angry People, verses 1 through 3 and 6. Thank you to our song leaders and to all of you for being here, which is on right now a sunny day. Imagine what a half hour can make. And just think about that with your lives, too. One day it can be raining, a half hour later, sunny. I am the Reverend J. Walden, settled minister here at the Unitarian Universalist for Sarasota, and we especially want to welcome all of you here, but especially want to welcome our visitors who are with us, both in person as well as online on live stream. We invite visitors to participate in the many different ways within our congregation. We ask you, if you want to find out more about Unitarian Universalism and this congregation, you can go sign up on our website. You'll see right there to sign in, and you will get a weekly newsletter about all the events that are happening here, and a couple of Zoom links for programs that are online as well. If you're in person, you can just sign up right outside the front door there. And we look forward to getting to know each other better. As well, we do have coffee and desserts as well after service, so please join us out in the courtyard for that as well. There are a few announcements today. For those, this is the first Sunday of the month, so for those who want to join the congregation, please join myself, somebody from membership, and the board chair in my office, which is in the building right across from here, the Lexow wing, and you can sign up and get to know each other a little bit. Also want to let you know that there will be tickets on sale in the courtyard. If you've been here before for a while, you have heard the wonderful voice of Sanaya Carroll, and she's going to be giving a concert here on February 11th at 2 o'clock. And so you can come here to get warmed up for the Super Bowl at 6 o'clock. Also on February 11th, I will be having my world religion class on Buddhism at 3 p.m. on Zoom, and you can check with the office for a link. And so if you need to have non-attachment to the outcome of the Super Bowl, that will be a good class to come to. Also, I think this afternoon, there'll be an online class on Article 2. And lastly, I want to to introduce, it is my great honor to have him here speaking with us, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush, who will be offering the sermon today. He's the head of the Interfaith Alliance. You can read his bio on the back of the order of service. And please, as well, tomorrow he will also be leading a workshop here from 2 to 4 o'clock on saving our democracy. And I'll tell you, it'll be well worth it. I just heard him in the forum, fabulous. So I look forward to it. One sad note, our musician, Herman Berndt, unfortunately could not be here today. He's going to come next week, but he had a pressing emergency that he could not make it. So we're just going to go right into the opening reading. Persist in Faith by Pat Uribe-Lichty. We face a challenge to democracy, a challenge that calls us to hope in moments of despair, a challenge that asks us to persist in faith that we can and we must make a difference. May our flaming chalice recommit us to the truth in our words and our actions, that we may live as we believe people should live. So please join us now in lighting the chalice with the words that are up on the screen. As we light this chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, we affirm our fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process in our congregations and in society at large.
Good morning. I'd like to invite AJ and Melina and Robin to come up and join me on the steps. You guys can just stand right next to me over here. Take her down at the end. There we go. We have not practiced this, as you can tell. Okay. So, the civil rights movement of the 1960s was a time where Christians and Jews and Unitarian Universalists came together to support the rights of African Americans. And today I want to share with you a little bit of history and the continued work of one of those civil rights era's heroes. Ruby Bridges was 6 years old when she became an icon of the civil rights movement. She was born in 1954, the same year as the Supreme Court decision of Brown versus the Board of Education. Her parents had been sharecroppers in Mississippi, where black children rarely went beyond the 3rd grade in education. They moved to New Orleans in 1956 looking for better employment opportunities. So when Louisiana was forced to integrate, the New Orleans school system required black students to take an exam to see if they could compete with their white classmates. And of the 165 students who took the test, Ruby was one of 5 who actually passed. Fearing for her safety, her dad was really afraid to send Ruby to the local white school in their neighborhood, but her mother insisted, wanting her children to have a better education than what she had been offered. So on that fateful day, in November 14th, 1960, Ruby and her mother were escorted to the William Franz Elementary School by 4 federal marshals. Crowds lined up along the sidewalks, yelling and screaming against the integration, throwing eggs and tomatoes at them. Ruby had to spend her very first day in the principal's office to protect her from the chaos because all the white students were pulled from the school that day. And for the rest of the year, Ruby was the only student in her 1st grade class, with the only teacher who would take her on, a white Boston native named Barbara Henry. So the bravery of this small child in helping to break down the barriers was hard on her and her family. For a year, the federal marshals had to protect them and their home. Her father lost his job. The local grocers would not sell to the family, and her grandparents were evicted from their farm in Mississippi. But the hardships did not deter Ruby. And throughout her life, she continued to be an activist for racial equality. And in 1999, she established the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance and to create change through education. In her work, she would speak out at schools, and she recently published a book of some of the letters from children she received on some of the things they are facing. And here are just a few. First. Get close.
Okay. Dear Ruby Bridges, my name is Madison. Your story inspired individuals like me to achieve something brighter and better. When I grow up, I want to help the world by inventing artificial plants to reduce the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. Carbon dioxide can cause damage to our climate by starting floods, storms, and other natural disasters. Thank you for inspiring people of different backgrounds to try to achieve their goals and dreams. Your impact has changed the world. Thank you for reading my letter. In appreciation, Madison.
Dear Ruby Bridges, you changed the world so much with your courage and bravery, and without you, I might not have the same friends I have today. I hope you can help to change gun violence. Even though you can try to change the kids' point of view about gun control, you still need to change the adults' point of view. It's like some of them do not understand the importance of gun control. If everyone had the courage you had, maybe my dream would come true. Sincerely, Ben.
Dear Ruby Bridges, I'm writing to you because you know what it's like to be judged, and yet you have been brave your entire life. You have stood up against hatred in a kind way. As an Asian girl, I feel sad and angry about this thing called Asian hate. My family is being judged for how we look, and people are violent against us. It is important to stop violence because I want my family and all families to be safe. I'm using my art skills to stop violence. All I want is for this world to be a peaceful place for all people to live. Once again, thank you for any help you can give us to keep us safe. Love, Melody.
A poem for Ruby. I'm not a mouse, mice are scarce and scared. I am a lion, roaring to the sky, a cheetah running as fast as the wind, an orca jumping out of the deep, dark ocean. I am not a mouse.
Our hands wrote what our hearts spoke. Racism is a grown-up disease. Stop using us to spread it. Now I invite all of the children and youth to head to their classrooms for a lesson on equality, equity, and justice. And if you're new here, I will help you find your way. I'll be in the back. Thank you.
As we gather here today, we know that there are people out in the world whose values are starkly different than ours. There are those with values using their voices, speaking with values of homophobia and transphobia, with values of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, with values of misogyny and racism, values of supremacy and despair. All of those values built on the foundation of closed-mindedness and hate. We must let our values be heard. The values of inclusion and plurality, the values of democracy and reason, the values of justice and equity, the values of interdependence and hope. All of these values built on the foundation of open-mindedness and love. As we go into our time for silent meditation, I invite you to contemplate on how you act with all your values. Our next reading is from David Pepper's book, Saving Democracy. Ask yourself, what are you going to do? Knowing that we are in a battle for democracy itself, what are you going to do? Knowing that the battle is taking place in every corner of this country, including right where we live today. Knowing that a key element in winning that battle is restoring accountability. And knowing that there is so much that you can do to help with this battle, and that the scale of attack on democracy requires that we all do more. End quote. So knowing all that, may the spirit of life and the stirring of compassion move you to greater acts of generosity in the days ahead and now as we take our offering. For those online and for those here on your cell phone, there's a QR code and a link in the website of the YouTube, and right under the description of today's service in the YouTube. Let this sacred time begin.
A reading from 1 Corinthians. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we only know in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know only in part, then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. And the greatest of these is love. Thank you for that beautiful music, and any place where I hear Sondheim, I know I'm at home. I want to start by saying thank you to Reverend Jay and to Catherine and to all those who made the forum this morning so successful. And I want to encourage all of you who may still be available tomorrow from 2 to 4. We are going to be doing a training, and it's very interactive and generative, and all of you are welcome. We would love to have you there. It's about democracy on the ballot and how we can mobilize to make sure that we defeat the Christian nationalist movement that is upon us. I want to introduce, in fact, my associate, who is Adam Friedman. Where are you? Adam, he's way in the back there, so subtle, but he's back there. Adam will be helping to lead that. Our election work is in his portfolio. He's the son of a rabbi, so you know he's got all sorts of stuff to work through. I'm kidding. He's an amazing colleague, and we're so lucky to have him at Interfaith Alliance. I also want to recognize Jamie and Stefania McLennan, who are here right in the front row. The reason I came here is because they told me about this fabulous Unitarian church that they attended in Sarasota. They're also, like, for some reason, talking all the time about Sarasota and how amazing it is, and how I have to come down to Sarasota, which I'm so delighted this has brought me here. And I'll take a moment of privilege to say that these two wonderful people were great. My parents were great fans of theirs. All of my family has been great fans of theirs, and I just love you both so much. And this love goes back 4 generations. I'll say Jamie's grandfather was my great-grandfather Louis Brandeis's main supporter, advocate in his 6-month fight to get confirmed to the Supreme Court. The McLennan and the Brandeis family goes way back. So I'm so grateful that we continue on this relationship, and thank you for bringing me here today. I also, you can applaud them. I mean, they're 2 amazing people who are doing amazing work, and I have a feeling they may slip in and out, and they probably like it that way anyway, but they no longer. I will also just take privilege to say that my grandparents were Unitarians. The daughter of Louis Brandeis, the son of Walter Rauschenbusch, met at the Unitarian Church and attended the Unitarian Church in Madison in the 1920s, where it was the hub of intellectual activity. They were helped in Madison, Wisconsin, build the Frank Lloyd Wright Unitarian Church. And when I came here today, I saw it in the building that is here today, this light coming in, and how important this idea of light is in this moment. And I had the honor of preaching at the Unitarian Church in our small town in Cape Cod, and my kids got to come up and be with me as we extinguish the chalice. And every night when I'm with them, we say, "And within our heart rises the light and stays with us throughout our lives." And so I feel very at home here. I'm so delighted at the opportunity to talk to you. This morning, this sermon talk is called "Shall Christian Nationalists Win? The Critical Role of Congregations in Protecting Our Diverse Democracy." I want to focus on the power that we have in our spiritual and religious communities that is absolutely crucial for meeting our current moment. The title of my talk is a reference to a sermon preached by Harry Emerson Fosdick in 1922 at First Presbyterian Church in New York City called "Shall the Fundamentalists Win?" It was one of the most famous sermons of the 20th century, and Fosdick's words have been much cited by liberal Christians over the past 100 years, concerned that their faith is being distorted by other Christians who are rigidly fixated on scriptural inerrancy, riven with apocalyptic worldviews, and intolerant of dissent. It is worth mentioning that Reverend Fosdick was kicked out of his church for preaching that sermon. And while the sermon addressed serious religious and theological concerns, it only hinted at the adverse effects that Christian fundamentalism had on the wider society in the 20th century and the decades since. A century later, we are faced with an even more serious threat, one that takes the theological language of Christian fundamentalism and grafts it on to a ruthless political machine intent on using the power of the state to enforce its worldview on the entire society. Now, not all of you, for some reason, were at the forum this morning. Oh, some good old-fashioned Baptist shaming from the pulpit. But I do think it would be helpful to take a minute or two to share some of the defining features of Christian nationalism, which is an ideology. It is a quest for power and a lens through which, unfortunately, a growing number of Americans view their role in society. It is not new, but it has drawn recent mainstream attention after Christian symbols, flags, Bible verses, bayonets with crosses on them were ubiquitous during the violent attack on our Capitol in January 6th. Christian nationalism has its roots in the dangerous myth that we were founded as a Christian nation and that Christianity holds a privileged place in our nation that must be preserved. They use the language of Christian nation with its underpinnings of white supremacy, xenophobia, patriarchy, and authoritarianism to dictate who is a true American and who will be relegated to perennial second-class citizenship. The goal of Christian nationalism is the consolidation of power in the hands of exclusive religious and political movement, and it is using the churches, the courts, and increasingly electoral politics to gain power over the majority of Americans who do not want it. The goal of Christian nationalism is the establishment of a theocracy. Unfortunately, Christian nationalism is not relegated to the shadows corners of our society. A poll recently released says that close to 30% of Americans are either adherents or sympathetic to Christian nationalism. And among white evangelical Protestant, that number jumps to nearly 2/3. 1 in 4 Americans believe that the United States should declare itself a Christian nation. As journalist and author Catherine Stewart recently wrote in the New Republic, Christian nationalism are increasingly framing their efforts as a spiritual battle that resonates with charismatic traditions. Christian nationalism pits the power of Jesus, which conveniently is their side, versus the power of Satan. The spiritualization of political power introduces a zero-sum game in which compromise is capitulation and which nothing less than God's favor is at stake. And it is those stakes of God's favor that lead them to violence. And violence is acceptable in the Christian nationalist worldview, who approve of using violence for their goals at 7 times the rates of other Americans. Nearly 1 in 5 Americans assert that not only is the United States a white Christian nation, but also that they are willing to fight to preserve it. At this point in the sermon, if you are alarmed, then you are paying attention, because we should be alarmed. But that does not mean we should lose hope. It does mean that we need to show up. The good news, as of now, is that Christian nationalism continues to be unpopular. 70% of Americans reject calls to declare America a Christian nation. Close to 75% of Americans say they prefer a country made up of diversity of faiths and not just Christianity. And 80% of Americans reject the idea that Christians should exercise dominion over all areas of American society. Christian nationalist views on race, gender, immigration, LGBTQ people are also unpopular and out of step with the American public. We are in a crucial moment, though, and it will take all of us to counteract the influence of Christian nationalist ideology and defend our democracy. And spiritual and religious congregations like this one will play a critical role because of the power you have. And before I get to the role of congregations, I want to tell you a foundational story about my own spiritual development. The first thing to know is that I am from an interfaith family, and my closest cousins are Jewish. We knew in our bones that no religion was inherently better than any other. And I like to say I was born with an interfaith heart. But my mother was Presbyterian, and I was raised in a Presbyterian church in Madison, Wisconsin. And we went to church on Sundays, and that was expected of us until around the age 15 or 16, when we went through confirmation classes and decided whether or not to join the church. And some of my siblings did join, and others chose not to. However, I believe I was the only person, maybe in the history of the Presbyterian Church, to fail confirmation. I failed because somehow I didn't figure out that attending confirmation classes was required. So instead, I went out around the normal time that confirmation class was, and I went and played with my friends and then went home after about an hour or two. And when the time came to get confirmed, I went, and the pastor said, "Almost all of you will be confirmed," and looked at me. And it taught me one of the most important lessons of my spiritual life, that it mattered that I physically showed up. It mattered to my family, it mattered to the church, it mattered to me that I showed up for what I believed and showed up alongside others in community. Right now, in this pivotal moment in our nation's history, it matters that we as individuals, but also that we as faith and spiritual communities of all kinds show up and stand against Christian nationalism. In this moment, when civic spaces and places where people traditionally congregate, such as public schools, higher education, and libraries, are being intentionally hollowed out and attacked, the physical campuses that house spiritual and religious congregations like this one can serve as welcoming locations where people can continue to come together, find common ground, and find common purpose. Isolation and separation are the enemy of democracy. But when we come together and grow in trust and understanding, we build a powerful inoculation against the culture of demonization and distrust in which Christian nationalism thrives. Many congregations are already playing this role, and I suspect, and I'm pretty sure, that this congregation is, but it would be powerful to see a map of Sarasota with stars of congregations that are filling this role and signifying that spiritual and religious communities that are destinations where civic life is valued and people of every background are invited to physically come together and know one another. In addition to locations where we can draw people in, congregations have networks to send people out for rapid mobilization and response. Congregations are people, and people are power. If a local temple, mosque, or another community has been targeted with bigotry and violence, as is increasingly the case, congregations like this one can bring people out to show up, to offer solidarity and support. And in addition to moments of crisis, congregations have the power to mobilize a diverse group of religious and spiritual people from a range of traditions to show up side by side to public forums, community rallies, to the voting booth, and send a clear signal to our elected officials and to our neighbors that we reject the exclusivist claims of Christian nationalism and demand that this community be a place where people of all faiths and all backgrounds be treated equally under the law. Congregations can also provide a hub of reliable information and education. Knowledge is power, And congregations are places of learning about spiritual traditions and practices, as well as about the world in which we live. And let me just say, the amount of disinformation that is about to come as an onslaught will be devastating. So how can a congregation provide inoculation against that? Reading books together, watching films, educating ourselves about our country's history and the experience of diverse Americans in an environment of an open inquiry is so important now. As we know, Christian nationalists are attempting to erase our history with book bans and restrictions on what can be taught. We need to mobilize to reverse these efforts, but in the meantime, the learning can go on inside of our congregation. I talked to one pastor who is organizing the way to accredit an AP African American history course in his church, for which people will receive credit. And in a conversation with another colleague, she decided that every congregation should actually stock all the books that have been banned to show what they stand for. And another friend of mine who lived across the hall from me in seminary, who's now the dean of a seminary, wrote on Facebook, "Hey everybody, I'm just writing from my banned book brunch from my church." And I was like, great, like let's show that actually the majority of religious people from different traditions do not support book bans. And as an aside, Interfaith Alliance has a close relationship now with the American Library Association. And we are developing with them a religion strategy, because all of these attacks are coming from religious people who say, oh, religion tells me I have to get rid of this book. Well, many more religious people could show up and say, we don't want it gone. This is a strategy, and it's something that this congregation can be a part of. Yeah, let's do it. So these are important ways that congregations can be a location, can be a mobilization, and they can be an educator. But perhaps the greatest contribution of congregations to this effort will not be what, but will be how we approach the struggle against Christian nationalists. I confess to you that Christian nationalism and the people who are its most ardent followers really frighten me. As a gay man with a husband and 2 children, I hear the words they use to talk about me, and I fear for what they would do to my family if they had the power. I find my hand balling into a fist as I prepare for the fight ahead. We are in a dangerous situation, and we need to be heads up about the threat. However, it is worth considering how we shall engage this struggle without becoming that which we hate. This is perhaps the most important role that congregations can play in this current moment, and we heard that reading from 1 Corinthians about love. So that reading, which is so familiar to many of us from weddings, was not actually written about the love between 2 individuals. It was written to an early Christian church in Corinth that was divided by issues of class, gender, backgrounds, and different ways to practice their faith. Earlier in the letter, Paul attempts to persuade the church how much they need each other, and that the diversity within their church is part of their strength. And in this passage, he acknowledges that there are many ways for followers of Jesus to practice their faith. But there is one characteristic that is the most important, and that is love. One more confession. When I hear about love, when I feel angry and threatened, as I do about Christian nationalism, it's hard for me to contain my rolling eyes. I mean, come on. Love. However, when I look to the spiritual leaders whom I admire, they talk about love. Gandhi said the nectar of love alone can destroy the poison of hate. and Gandhi's student, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., told us, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. And Nelson Mandela said, people must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love, for love comes more naturally to the human heart than the opposite. The challenge that Christian nationalism poses to our country is grave, but certainly no graver than what Dr. King, Mahatma Gandhi, or Nelson Mandela faced. They chose love because they looked into the deep well of their spiritual traditions and saw the path of love offered the greatest resource and tactic that would actually lead to the future that they longed for. The opportunity is for us to do the same. And it starts in a way that's very personal. And the local congregation can help each of us learn how to access the love in our own spirits, hearts, and minds. How do we learn the discipline of love? Because it's hard to learn and requires practice. But as so many of our spiritual forebears remind us, it can and must be done. Each diverse congregation will call upon its own wisdom, which is the beauty of it. And we can learn from one another's traditions of love as a source of power. We can also learn from the collective practice of love that is nonviolent resistance. In an interview that I was fortunate to do with Representative John Lewis about his time in the civil rights movement, he told me that people had to be trained in nonviolence before they were allowed to go to the protests. Our congregations can be a place where we learn the deep roots of nonviolent protests and show up with love even as we resist the powers that would try to demean or destroy us. Love will be our guide, our tactic, and our power as our congregations mobilize in this time of great challenge to our democracy. Love taps into the deepest wells of the Spirit and joins people together to refuse to hate. Love diffuses lies. Love targets no one. Love casts a vision of a future in which everyone has dignity and worth. This is not about them out there, but about us. When we are overcome by love, we show up and we uncurl the fist and extend the hand to others from all faiths, races, and backgrounds and make the invitation. Join us. Together, we can show up. Together, we can be powerful. Together, guided by the transformative power of love, we can diffuse Christian nationalism. We can believe e pluribus unum, out of many, one. Together, all of us, we will win. Amen.
Thank you for that inspiring message. Thank you. Now I invite us to rise in body and our spirit for our hymn 155, Circle Round for Freedom. For our closing words, I offer you the words of the Reverend Wayne B. Arneson. Take courage, my friends. The way is often hard and the path is never clear. And the stakes are very, very high. But take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You are not alone. Please join me now in extinguishing the chalice as we say our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you all for your presence here today. Thank you, and if you can, tomorrow between 2 and 4. Thanks.